If everyone would please take their seats, including the panel. If you all would please take your seats, we're going to get started. We want to thank everybody for being here this afternoon. Welcome and thank you for coming today. The past several years has seen unprecedented assaults on our communities. Many politicians in the Georgia General Assembly have spent more time seeking higher office than considering the real problems that Georgians face. All the while, the folk in charge have made it increasingly difficult for Georgians to make their voices heard. We've witnessed not just the passing of restrictive laws and regulations, but also the weaponizing of procedures, the limiting of public testimony. All of this was designed to suppress the voices of constituents impacted by dangerous political decisions. I knew, and my colleagues knew, this could not stand. This could not be the new normal. So we find ourselves here tonight, convening our inaugural summer field hearings. We're bringing the legislature to the people. Georgia House Democrats believe all Georgians deserve the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. Inspired by your stories today, we will continue to work toward that future. Thank you for being here tonight to stand up for what you believe in and to help make a truly free Georgia possible. Thank you for continuing to try to make a difference for your communities. We're so glad that you're here. Before we begin, a little level setting. This hearing will be conducted like a traditional committee meeting. We will recognize speakers and ask them to come to the podium to offer remarks. To ensure everyone is afforded the opportunity to speak, we will ask that you keep your remarks as concise as possible. The discourse today will be civil, and anyone who cannot remain civil will be asked to leave. Members may have brief follow-up questions. Please understand that any lack of follow-up is a function of time we have and not a lack of interest. On that front, we've developed innovations to ensure every story is heard. On your way in, you pass our story collection area. If you aren't comfortable speaking in public but still want to share your story, or if you have already heard a comment and testimony today but would like to say something similar, please see a staff member at one of the booths and we will record your remarks. You'll also notice that we have QR codes set up. You can scan this QR code to upload your video on your own time if today doesn't work for you. Or if our time at this venue runs out before we can get to everyone, we truly want to make sure that no story is untold or unheard. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the presence of some special guests and other elected officials. So first, let us recognize a special guest all the way from the Tennessee House of Representatives, Representative Ramesh Akbari. Would you please stand and let us greet you? We also want to recognize the chair of the Georgia House Democratic Caucus, Representative Billy Mitchell. We have also the vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus, Representative Karen Bennett. We have with us Representative Terry Cummins.
She might have stepped outside.
Maybe she stepped out. She was here. And we want to welcome Michelle Kane, who is a candidate for House District 99. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. At this time, we're going to call on the members of our panel. I am, of course, Carolyn Hughley, and I have the privilege of representing the best of Columbus, Georgia, which is House District 141. And I'm going to allow our other members to introduce themselves with whatever introductory remarks they would like.
Start with me. Good evening, everyone. My name is Long Tran, State Rep for House District 80, which are the cities of Dunwoody, Doraville, and Chambly. And I want to thank Rep Hughley for including me in this hearing. I think DEI is very important. I'm a small business owner, and I employ DEI recruitment into my small business all the time because we have a diverse community that comes into our coffee shop, and everyone's taste and preferences are different. And to understand that requires having a diverse staff.
Good evening, everyone. I'm State Representative Phil Olalier. I represent State House District 59, which includes parts of Atlanta and a little bit of East Point. I'm really excited about this evening's conversation, and really more so excited to hear from you all as neighbors, as students, as small business women and men, and underscoring and breathing life into the significance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so thank you again for being here, and Chairwoman, thank you so much for including me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Representative Imani Barnes. I represent House District 86 in Tucker, so it goes from Toco Hills, Tucker, Clarkston, Decatur, and I said those different cities because it is very diverse, and so DEI is of the utmost importance, including everyone and listen to everyone's needs and issues. They're very diverse, so I'm proud, Chair Lady, to include me on this panel and on this committee, and we're ready to work. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Campbell, and I'm the State House Rep for District 35, which is in North Cobb County, includes the cities of Kennesaw and Ackworth, and in the new redistricting, a little bit of Marietta. And our district also is increasingly growing and vibrant and diverse. And I was elected as the first woman ever to serve this district. And so the people are showing us that they are interested in growth. You know, I grew up here in Georgia, proud product of Georgia's public schools, and I've owned and worked in businesses here in Georgia since 2000. And in that time, in the last 24 years, and throughout our history, even before that, Georgia's elected officials, our business leaders, our community advocates have really worked hard to ensure that our state is a place where everyone can thrive. And so today I'm very interested to hear from all of you to understand the impact. There are many, many studies. McKinsey just came out with a tremendous global study looking at, for the last 20 years, companies around the world and the impact that DEI has had, positive impact on their businesses, both from a culture perspective, from an empowerment perspective, and to the economic bottom line for their businesses and their communities. So I believe that there is great momentum in our state to continue these efforts, and I'm very curious to hear from you all today to understand how do we make sure that the opponents who are trying to push us backward are not successful, because there's a great positive momentum going, and we want to just leverage that and keep it going. So thank you all today, and thank you, Chairwoman Carolyn Hughley, for inviting me to participate with all of my colleagues here today.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being a part of our committee. I did recognize Representative Terry Cummins when she was out of the room, but I want to recognize her again, and we're happy that you're with us this evening. We're going to begin our time together with a presentation from Phil Polk, who's the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Lead here at the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. Give him a warm round of applause as he comes.
I think it did. Okay. Good evening, everyone. And the response didn't need to be warm. I just wanted to make sure that I was acknowledged. So thank you all. First, let me give you greetings on behalf of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. We are an institution that's been here for the past 10 years. As you can see, we are excited to experience expansion. which just serves to let us know that there is increasing interest in not only matters of civil and human rights, but DEI is included in that. As was said in my introduction, I lead the diversity, equity, and inclusion work here at the center, and I am a transparent and proud advocate of DEI. So I know I'm in the house when I heard y'all's opening comments, so I'm excited to be here. I was asked to share a bit of the origin story of DE&I, and I will happily do that because I think we all will learn something tonight. I know I learned something as I was doing this research, but let me start with a little bit of kind of the mission of the center and how DEI plays a role in that. So the mission of the center is to become a museum and a cultural organization that inspires the change maker in each of us. And so because we are trying to inspire change makers, part of that is getting folks to see and understand the benefit of diversity, of equitable treatment, and of inclusion. So as I was asked to start with an origin story, as I thought about kind of when DE&I started, and from a DEI perspective at the center, we engage clients in trainings, DEI trainings, to help organizations create more inclusive cultures. So this is corporations, universities, not-for-profits, community organizations. Anyone that has an organization with more than 3 people needs DE&I principles and strategies. And so we talk to everyone across the country. And when I thought about the origin story, the first thing I thought was, well, affirmative action, right? 1961, JFK issues the first affirmative action directive, and is that the start of the origin story? No, it's not. Then I thought about 1964, LBJ and the signing of the Civil Rights Act. Is that when this started? No, it's not. I actually am going to take us back to 1865 and the development of the Freedmen's Bureau, which was the first organization designed to provide food, shelter, medication, and land to displaced blacks. And so when I thought about that equitable treatment example, it leads me to say, wow, I didn't know that DEI work in earnest started in 1865. And so I'm going to give you a bit of a history lesson. And the reason I don't have a presentation is because I want you to focus on some of the themes that I'm going to cover. The dates are less important than the themes because I think at the end of this recollection, we will see some parallels to where we are right now in 2024. So Freedmen's Bureau established in 1865. In 1866, Congress passed the first Civil Rights Act and the 14th Amendment and established citizenship for emancipated African Americans. 14 days later, President Andrew Johnson vetoed the act, claiming that it discriminated against whites. So I just want you to hear kind of some of these themes because these themes are going to be very familiar to us. 1872, the Freedmen's Bureau was defunded. Go to 1961 is when JFK started the affirmative action executive order to create enforcement and to dictate more inclusion of African Americans to federal defense contractors. So this first affirmative action executive order was to try to get more African Americans into the military. In 1962, he found, again, another thematic statement for consideration. When he put this executive order in place, many organizations saw uneven enforcement because many companies bordering the South at the time ignored the order. We know what's best for us. We don't even need a presidential decree to tell us what it is we want to do. We think that we will face too much opposition to carry this executive order out. So they just didn't do it. 1964, LBJ signs the Civil Rights Act, and in 2 parts. Part 6 was for federally funded organizations. Part 7 was to provide the private sector with directions on how to end discrimination. What happened in late 1964? Pushback. Folks were confused about how to comply with new laws to diversify while prohibiting discrimination against white Americans. So I think you see a theme with efforts to try to establish diversity, equity, and inclusion, and pushback saying that this is just not practical or relevant for us to do. In the 1970s, we think that the SCOTUS decision last year with higher learning was the first time that happened. In the 1970s, University of California at Davis had a lawsuit, Regents of UC versus BAKKE. I don't know if that's Bake or Back, but there was a suit that said your efforts to try to diversify our college campus are letting folks in that have lower test scores than white students. So we take issue with that. Now at the time, what the SCOTUS said was, okay, we cannot establish quotas, but we can let race play as a factor into the admission into universities or institutions of higher learning. This goes on and on. In 1992, disabled Americans were included in the concept of diversity through the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990. And then from 2000 to 2012, states like Michigan, Arizona, and New Hampshire all repealed affirmative action. So there are a lot of folks that I deal with in the work that I do that would swear to me up and down that DEI started in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd. And what we're seeing is, as far back as 1865, there are instances of, number one, recognizing the need for diverse representation, and then the pushback that comes from folks who simply don't want to do it. So while the fight is happening over education and hiring, the philosophy of DEI during that time has also evolved. The goalposts continue to move. So I remember at the very start of this work, after affirmative action, there was D&I. You know, raise your hands if you remember D&I, diversity and inclusion. It was the only thing we talked about. Then we added the E. So it was diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now we see DEI-B for belonging, DEI-J for justice, DEI-A for advocacy. So the point in giving all of those acronyms is that this is an ever-evolving discipline, and it needs to be evolving because the demographics of our country continue to change. Now we have the LGBTQ plus community that is very vibrant and vocal, saying that while we're making space for these needs and for this diverse representation, you need to include us. I remember back when the question was, do you call African Americans colored? Do you call them Afro-Americans? Do you call them black? What are you supposed to call? So the point is this conversation will never end. But what I wanted to leave with us today is that the most important thing is that history shows us that while all of these things continue to change, one thing remains constant, and that is we cannot find universal alignment. There is always a disagreement as to how important DEI is supposed to be. And so one side scores a victory, and as I walk through that historical kind of reference, the other side punches back. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. So let me just close with this, and it's what I firmly believe to be true, and that is the following. Organizations that practice creating a representation within their workforce of people who mirror the communities that they serve, making sure that you treat all of your employees equitably, which means treating them at their point of need so that they can have an equal opportunity at success, and making sure that everyone's contributions are valued and that people feel as though they belong as a part of the organization. Now, some folks call that DEI. I call it sound business practices, because the data shows us irrefutably that when you practice these strategies, you see higher innovation, you see reduced employee turnover, you see higher employee engagement, you see higher levels of creativity, and you see higher profits. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg of the benefits that we see when we choose to engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion by whatever name we choose to give it. Because let's make no mistake, I am also experiencing this now in 2024. We have to decide whether we continue as the DE&I department or whether we change our name. Because I've had clients call me and say, I want your services, I need your content, but if you send me an invoice that has diversity on it, I can't pay you. My company will not allow me to pay you. So there are pivots that are happening as we speak with respect to what we call ourselves. I don't believe there's a pivot with respect to what we teach and communicate, but I think we all need to understand that, you know, to quote Denzel Washington from Training Day, this ain't checkers, this is chess. And we have to figure out the moves that are happening in opposition to this effort to make sure that we are as inclusive as we can be, that we meet people at their point of needs, and that we have workplaces that mirror the communities we serve. I just walked through the definition of DEI and did not use the word diversity, did not use the word inclusion. And if those are the gymnastics, the verbal gymnastics that we have to practice, so be it. At the end of the day, the demographics of our country will suggest that if we don't find a way to include everyone and to meet everyone at their point of need, we're going to lose. And I don't see any losers in this room. So I'm excited about the energy that's in this room. I'm excited about the conversation that's about to take place. And I just wanted to frame it up with, y'all, this is not new. This has been happening since 1865. And I believe that it will continue. We may score some victories here in the short term, but the fight won't be over. And I know in my conversations with Representative Campbell, she was like, I try not to use the word fight. And I wish I was where you are, but I'm not. I see myself fighting every single day to justify the need for this work, and I'm just surprised that I have to fight to help organizations understand how best to be successful in the marketplace. But that's where we are, and that's the mission of the center, and it's a mission that I'm willing to gladly accept. So with that as background, hopefully that has been beneficial from a perspective point of view, and I just encourage you to have success with tonight's meeting. Thank you so much.
Mr. Polk, thank you so much for that presentation, and that's a good place for us to start. We're going to move into our presentations from those who have signed up. There is a sign-up sheet. If you have not signed up and you want to be heard, you can let Miss Ashley Robinson in the back know, and we will make sure that we hear from you. We've also been joined by another one of our colleagues, the treasurer of the House Democratic Caucus, Representative Solomon. I don't want to mess up your last name. Adesanya. All right, thank you. So we're going to get started with our first speaker, and each speaker is going to have 3 to 5 minutes to speak. When you get close to your time, you're going to hear a nice little chime. And then we would like for you to conclude your remarks or come to the end of your remarks at that time so that we can hear from everyone who wants to be heard tonight, because this is what this is all about, making sure that everybody has a voice at this table and everybody is welcome here. So we're going to start with Chanel Haley with Georgia Equality.
Five minutes is very short for me, but I'm going to try, okay? Good evening. My name is Chanel Haley. I'm going to start off with where I am today, and then I'll tell you how DEI helped me. So today, I am 9 years into being at Georgia Equality, that I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement. Starting out, by the way, is in 9 years, I was the first trans person to be hired at Georgia Equality, and specifically the first black person to be, first black trans person to be hired at Georgia Equality. And we're saying that as an organization that is LGBTQ+, that was 15 years in, that still didn't hire a trans person then, okay? I also am currently the vice chair of the Clayton County Democrats. I've also served as the secretary of the advisory committee to the United States Commission on Civil Rights. And I had counted 13 other boards and commissions that I have served on, from the bottom all the way up to the top. And I wanted to start off with how we got into me in my career and doing DEI. So I got a phone call from, at that time, former Council President Cesar Mitchell, who said that they had an appointment that he needed for the Atlanta Human Relations Commission, which is the Civil Rights Board in the city of Atlanta. And they wanted the people on the board to represent how the city looked, and they wanted to put a trans person on there. So we met, we discussed, old Atlanta and growing up and all that, our politics, we got along, it was great. City council approved, there I am, down the road. A year later, my colleagues voted me in as the chair, which then also, new history moment, is making me the first chair to ever, the first trans person to ever chair a chartered committee for the city of Atlanta. This, though, comes after working on a campaign in the city of Atlanta for, at that time, candidate Simone Bell, who then became elected to office for District 58. Now, during that, again, an out black lesbian, first in the country, during the campaign, it was advised to her that I should not work on a campaign and she could never win, running around, knocking doors with trannies. I'm gonna not say the organization that actually advised her of that, but obviously she did win. I did end up going to the Capitol and working there, and got involved with the party. And then from there, worked with the LGBT caucus, as well as then, as I said, moved throughout the parties, whether it was a state, elected to as a state delegate, to a national delegate, and so on, so on. My point of saying all this is that when you give a person opportunity, diversity, and then you foster inclusion, then the possibilities are endless. I myself today, have had advanced schooling with make sure I have certifications from Cornell University around diversity and inclusion, around employment law, to make sure that when I am talking to organizations, particularly those that have ERGs or that want ERGs, to make sure that they are including those different types of people within their organizations to have a voice. Particularly, again, because I work in towards equality, it has to be around sexual orientation, gender identity, and making sure that gender inclusion and those across the spectrum are within the policies that are needed. Because we still live in a state, one of 3 states in the country, that does not have civil rights protections for any person. Any person. So it seems to be very important that we have DEI plus, right? And I heard it was brought up about how it changed from diversity and equality to diversity and inclusion to diversity and belonging. We have also forgot that diversity, equality, inclusion, and equity. That's the next step, is that obviously we need to make sure that things are equitable when we are talking about organizations, particularly here in Atlanta, where we've done so much work here around our equality. The next step in this area is equity. And I will stop there because, again, 5 minutes is very short. So I can keep going. Read my bio if you want to, but thank you.
Miss Haley, thank you for your remarks. A quick question. I know you had referenced employee resource groups.
Yes.
Would you mind speaking a little bit more to the purpose and role that these groups play within a workplace?
Absolutely. Employee resource groups play a role in belonging to its core, right? You work in a corporation, no matter the bigger they are, the more lost you can become and feel threatened. You need that support system. So women need support from other women. You need people from your own race, your sex, your sexual orientation, you name it, however you identify, you need that. The best ERG groups actually mandate that you support a different ERG group that you're not part of. I'll tell you, Georgia Power is one of those where if you are part of one, you have to support another one also. In case everybody's wondering, when you see these pride parades, those are ERG groups. Most of the people who's in those parades are not, they don't identify as being gay. It is about supporting. And I also want to say that if you work for a corporation or you're thinking about getting an ERG, they also call it affinity groups. If you're trying to have that in your organization, if you are not, or if your CEO or upper management is not diverting funds to that ERG or the affinity group, they don't mean business. Because they absolutely have to have money in order to conduct and be able to support their team, and also should be able to chime in separately around legislative actions taking place in the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
We will now hear from Samuel Wakefield. Y'all give him a round of applause while he comes.
Good evening. How are y'all doing? So my name is Sam Wakefield. I'm a husband, a father, an educator, father of 4 daughters, so it's a lot of black girl magic in my household. I'm also a DEI practitioner in my day job, so I'll tell a little bit about that for a minute. We work with a lot of companies, in particular companies that are led by, founded by black and brown folks, mostly black women. And, you know, it's been for the last number of years in particular where we've seen a sea change prior to the last 2 years. A lot of companies that came out of the woodwork saying, wow, we really should do something about what's going on with race and all of the issues in our country. And so companies that would approach us and say, hey, we really want you to work with us. We had an opportunity to say to a number of folks, well, look, we're focused on companies that are actually looking to shift conditions within their companies and within the places that they work. And that allowed us to vet a lot of folks out of the business because in some ways, a lot of folks who've come out of the woodwork over the last number of years talking about DEI, they're focusing on shifting language and things like that. We're focused on shifting conditions. And so we've seen a lot of impact from our work with, again, Black founders, Black women, organizations that we've worked with where we've been able to see like conditions materially shift, whether it's promotion rates, retentions, satisfaction, efficacy, things like that. However, and Mr. Polk, I don't know if he's still in the room, but sort of stole my thunder around the fact that like things have changed. And also this is not the first time that we've seen this, right? As we've seen time and time again, there's been a backlash to this kind of progress. So after the recent attack on DEI related initiatives, our own company has seen a number of challenges. So first of all, the Black and brown women that we support, they've seen challenges with their funding, whether it's in the nonprofit space, not being able to get funding from nonprofits because of, scare tactics and people being concerned with race-conscious policies. We've seen our own revenues decline as a result of for-profit companies saying, well, we need to shift the language, we need to shift how we approach things, and we don't know if we can touch DEI kind of work because it's sort of a high-button topic. And so in spite of the adversity and challenges that we've seen in the business side, I can just say DEI is alive. The spirit of it is alive and well in our civic work. And so when I say our, I mean my family and I. So my wife and I, we choose to send our kids to a school where, as a community, we've decided that one of our core values is learning to live together. It's an intentionally diverse community. And one of the things that we've done, and this mirrors what you've seen over the course of history when it comes to progress that's been led by and for Black folks usually, where there's been a backlash or a blacklash. What we've seen is instead of using direct language like diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever you want to call it, we've said, all right, if our value is learning to live together, what does that mean? We create spaces where there is a diverse representation of families and students. We've said, all right, what do we need to do to make sure that everyone who comes to this space is welcome? What do we need to do to ensure that when we're seeing outcomes that are predictable across lines of race or gender or orientation or whatever, how do we address those outcomes? By the way, all of those things are elements in the spirit of DEI. We're just calling it something different because guess what? That's what we've had to do throughout the nation's history, throughout our course of history. And so we're going to continue to do that work. Again, I think that while we've seen shifts over time, I'm a firm believer in the fact that if you're doing the spirit of this work, it's a different name, but it's the same aim. So I'm a proud practitioner of this work. I also fully believe that we need partners. We need partners at the local level. We certainly need partners in policy making who are pushing past the conversation about the language and ensuring that we're still accomplishing the spirit of the aim. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Anybody on the panel have a question for Representative Campbell?
Thank you, Chairwoman. And thank you so much for sharing the work that you're doing and sharing the language that you're using. I'm curious to know, as we've seen this most recent round of pushback from many of our policymakers and in some of our laws, what are you hearing from the people that you work with about this pushback? How is it affecting them? Is it affecting them?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak on the business front first. So in particular, for most of the Black women that I'm working with or that we're helping to try to, one organization, for example, they're looking to basically launch a spinoff company. And so they're in the process of meeting with VCs. And I mean, first of all, they're already, I think the AJC just reported recently, less than 1% of venture capital funding is already going to Black and brown folks. And that number has decreased dramatically over the last 2 years as a result of the attacks on affirmative action, the attacks on, I mean, most folks are probably familiar with the Atlanta-based example of Fearless Fund, but I have folks that we work with who are directly impacted by the lack of access to funding. That's a real need. And by the way, I hope our Attorney General, he's been out here putting forward all of these court sort of cases to fight against this elsewhere, there's an opportunity for him to look now into the fact that so many of our white VCs that are based in this city who are funding almost exclusively white-backed firms, let's look into that. That's another opportunity. We want to have a race-neutral kind of policy here, which I don't agree with, but let's treat everyone equally if that's what we're going to do. But, I think I'm seeing on the business side, our folks really struggle with that. And then I think in the education space, I gave the example of the school we send our kids to, but in general, I mean, a number of and I'm a former educator. I was an elementary school teacher. What I'm seeing and hearing from educators is, while they may not be getting to the point of being censured at the district level, like we've seen in a couple of places thus far regionally, teachers are saying, I don't know what I can say. I don't know what I can teach, and I don't want to go past a certain line because I don't want to create, unless I have an administration that's supporting us or someone that's going to provide cover or backing. And again, fortunately, I chair a board of a school network, and so we have these conversations to how do we create the conditions for, our staff to be able to teach with freedom and expression, that kind of deal. But, I think without the conditions, it's hard for educators as well. And so I think it's popping up in a lot of different places.
Thank you.
We appreciate your coming tonight. Y'all give them a round of applause. From the Atlanta Urban League of Greater Atlanta, John Moy.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and thank you, certainly distinguished members of the audience. And so we actually have a statement here tonight, and I will stay within the parameters. So, we've long faced an insidious and often successful effort by regressive voices that distort phrases and actions that promote unity and fairness. They've taken the words affirmative action and changed them from a proactive way to level the playing field of education and business and turned them into an accusation of reverse discrimination. They've also put a negative face on programs that offer free lunch to school children or Head Start for those who have no access to public or pre-K education or kindergarten. And since the beginning of the movement for voting rights, local activists have been labeled outside agitators in states across the nation, including Georgia. Efforts to grant everyone equal access to the ballot box are once again under attack, diluting the purity of the elections process. And here we are in the 21st century fighting against these forces to prevent losing more of the ground that our ancestors fought so hard and died for to gain. And this time the battle has extended to an acronym, DE&I. Yet the meaning of these words were taken alone are not objectionable goals to most Americans. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, in other words, fairness for everyone. DE&I has become the new bogeyman for forces wishing to roll back initiatives designed to promote justice. Rather than embrace the amazing cultural, racial, religious, and ethnic diversity of our nation, these forces have instituted a plan to take us backwards, to cancel programs that inject fairness into the system that have guided our lives for so long. So it is up to us once again, you, me, us, leaders, to educate the public and to engage as many people as possible to protect the rights of all Americans, most of all the right and responsibility to vote for leaders who believe our nation should enshrine everyone's right to health, wellness, economic stability, and equal justice. I think I heard the ping, am I correct? So in conclusion, let me just say this if I can. My daughter is a professional, and she works, I won't out it, but she works for a major corporation here in the Atlanta metropolitan region, and she's a DE&I manager. And so she called me maybe a couple of months ago, almost in panic. Dad, which way should I go with this thing? This thing is going to go south, And she's trying to figure out how to navigate this. They were sort of gung-ho about it, but they're pulling back. And I said to her, listen, you're always going to have DE&I. They're going to call it whatever they're going to call it. And I think somebody talked about, in other words, that in the end, at the end of the day, it's about money. It's about dollars. It's just good dollars and cents. So no matter what they call it, and they're just going to change it, continue to fight the good fight. We're not going to go back in this country. And so I think we're just going to have to come to the conclusion that, I'll leave you with this. I'm going to quote it was David Dinkins, who used to be the mayor of New York City. And Mayor Dinkins would often say, You know, some of us came over in the hull on the Mayflower, and some of us came over in the hull of ships. But one thing is for certain, we're all in the same boat now. So we have to fight together and live together and work together. And but DEI, I don't think it's going anywhere. But I thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Ms. Shahida Kamath. And pronounce your name correctly for us. Shacheda. All right, y'all give her a round of applause.
Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I'm Sucheta Kamath, and I'm a speech and language pathologist, an advocate for disabilities. I am an immigrant, and I'm standing here for the very essence of what DEI means, which is allowing me to be in this country legally and contribute meaningfully to the outcomes of people who need opportunities. I'm a champion for infinite human potential, and if it is not for framing the human potential from the perspective of DEI, we are excluding people from meaningfully contributing to society. And this alone is not a financial contribution, but it's a human contribution. And I'm going to give you a quick example of Rising Tides. It's a Miami-based car wash started by a father and son team to find a meaningful employment for their severely autistic young son. After turning the world upside down, they could not find a way to find meaningful employment in spite of his incredible talent, but definitely noticeable, externally visible disabilities. So guess what they did? They opened a car wash, and that car wash exclusively employs people on autism spectrum disorder. And they collectively wash 165,000 cars a year. So when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would like to frame it as providing opportunity to all people, and who is to say who is all? So I think the challenge really we are facing is, this is equity. There's nothing special about this. It's literally allowing me to have my voice and be heard by adjusting or allowing me to adjust the microphone. You afforded me equity. And inclusion is really fostering inclusion to allow everyone to have a meaningful ways to exchange their views and be allowed to be part of something called larger world. Jonathan Friedman, in his book called World is Flat, said that when I was raising my children in elementary, I used to tell them, eat your Wheaties. There are children in Ethiopia that are dying of hunger. And he said, by the time my children went into high school, I said, do your homework. There are children in India who will take your jobs. So as we think about competing at a global platform, how are we as Americans showing up by affording opportunities to our people so they can be capable individuals and contribute meaningfully to civil dialogue and global economy? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker comes to us all the way from Columbus, Georgia, Mr. Tracy Mosley. He's with the Columbus Urban League. League of the River Valley.
That's it. That's it. It takes a while. We just changed our name. Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Mosley. I'm going to readjust the mic because to make it more inclusive of my voice, right? My name is Tracy Mosley. I'm president and CEO of the Urban League of the River Valley. We are one of two urban leagues in the state of Georgia. Of course, the Greater Atlanta that you've heard from John, and in Southwest Georgia, in Columbus, Georgia. And thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and the committee for this very important discussion that we're having this evening. You know, I sided with the brother that with the 4 daughters because I had they're grown now, but I've got 5 daughters. And with 5 daughters and a wife, there was no DEI in my household. Am I right? I felt like I was in a sorority house every day. But all that to say, thank you so much. You know, I'm going to read a statement like with John. This is very important to our movement, the Urban League movement. We are led by a National Urban League out of New York, but there are, like, as I mentioned, there are 92 urban leagues around the country. And you know you think there's a lot of differences, but there's really a lot of similarities in this movement, because out of all the 92, we are all discussing the same thing. You know, you think things are localized, but really when you get to this on the national landscape, we're all experiencing the same things. So following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, U.S. corporate, government, and educational institutions raised their voices to support the movement of Black lives. They also publicly pledged to uphold values of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and actively partner with Black and other communities of color to defend the causes of justice and hold those in violation accountable. However, 4 years later, less than 4 years later, we are witnessing a methodology of backtracking of those commitments. There's been Supreme Court cases. There's been local and state governments that are trying to turn back the hands of time each and every month. I'm holding up a map here that you see, the map of the United States with a lot of color in it. Every one of those colors are levels of laws that have been enacted and introduced by local and state governments. In fact, there's only 10 states that have not enacted laws to turn back the hands of time. Some of these rollbacks include primary and secondary school bans, books on our history, eliminating DEI positions at U.S. colleges and universities to result in the loss of admissions practices to make sure there was an equal playing field among our colleges and universities, higher education. The legislation against minority-centered federal agencies like the Minority Business Development Agency, just to name a few. Whether it's called anti-wokeism, anti-critical race theory, or CRT, or anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion. These policies and tactics undermine democratic principles and threaten to erase the idea of Blackness from our collective history, memory, and our future. So us at the Urban League, we're encouraging, and we work with corporations, nonprofits, organizations all over this country. But we're encouraged to use our collective ideas to educate ourselves, our community, and our corporate partners, and our elected officials on the dangers of this rhetoric and its associated policies of our shared safety, economic, and our democracy. We will provide background information from our Urban League's diversity position relevant to reference articles and approving talking points to use. So we're loaning this information out to everyone. We've got a plethora of information and data that if you really sink your teeth into, it's damaging our entire society and our way of living as we know it today. So I just wanted to conclude by saying that we are here to adamantly defend DE&I, whether it be at corporate agencies, whether it be in political and government agencies, or whether it be in our private institutions, and particularly our institutions of higher education. So what we're speaking of today is very important, that we've got to come together collectively to do whatever we can to defend democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have, oh, yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Thank you, Chairwoman. My question is, you've been doing this work a long time, and I'm curious to understand, similarly as I've asked before, but, have you seen a shift in response, participation from before the pushback, when we were seeing progression forward, greater emphasis and investment and a lifting up of DEI, versus more recently the rollback of those programs and the negative connotation being pushed out there about even those words? Like, can you share a little bit in terms of the work, especially at the Urban League, that you do with corporate partners, financial institutions, communities?
That's a very good question. And, there was so much. You think about the George Floyd era, and during the 2020, there was so much discussion. It was so much at the forefront. There was different, we can have a discussion about the rationale behind why that was at the forefront, whether it be guilt or whether it be just an awakening. But the issue at hand now is that we are being confronted with particularly from a political standpoint, we've been confronted with things that we've never been confronted with before. And we have to come out. There is a shift because, again, there was an awakening, but that awakening has gotten quieter. And so I think it's up to all of us collectively to bring this stuff and keep it to the forefront. That's why hearings like this is so important. And thank you all and Chairwoman for bringing this to the forefront, because if we don't keep this to the forefront, it will die on the vine. But particularly with these positions, government positions, educational positions, admissions practices. I'm a result of, you might say DEI from back in the 80s, of me getting entered into college, because I was offered a level playing field. My parents couldn't afford to send me to the college that I went to, but I guess because of certain things that were that was in play, I was able to. It was an equal, level playing field where I could go out and get college education. If those things are wiped away, we don't see it today, but we will see it in the near future. It'll come to view, and those things will come to surface.
Thank you, sir, for your remarks. I'm looking across the room, and I feel confident saying that we're with brothers and sisters and believers of DEI.
Yes.
And so you have a job, I imagine, down in Columbus, working with a very diverse mix of employers and
Absolutely.
Stakeholders.
Absolutely.
And so I'm looking at these empty seats, and I'm thinking about the work that is required to build a shared understanding of these practices and the need for these initiatives and for respect and empowerment and inclusion and access. What techniques have you seen work to address that underlying fear, that stigma that's attached to the term? What techniques or tactics have you seen work to shift that understanding?
It was spoken earlier with the brother from this institution that we're in right now. I'm a proponent of working within. Instead of working against the grain, I believe you work within the system. And so sometimes you can't come across as harsh in trying to demand things. You can't demand something from a Fortune 500 company. You have to work within the system and insist on demonstrating how these practices is going to really add to the bottom line of their company and add the bottom line of profits. So it's really, it's an individualized situation, because I work within our city government, very cooperative institution, and they have both Democrat, Republican, black, white, it doesn't matter. But by working within, we're able to really demonstrate and to work, let's work together on this versus working against you. And so I'm just really want to advocate for everyone to really do everything we can to work within the system, because it can work and we can make some things happen and make change happen. Sure.
I'd like to recognize the presence of Jennifer Freeman. She's with Congresswoman Nakima Williams' office, and she's with Thank you so much for being here, and we appreciate the work that Congresswoman Williams continues to do for us, so thank you. We have Michelle Kane.
So I didn't plan to speak today. I'm an immigrant, first-generation Korean American. I immigrated to Georgia in 1992. So I have lived here for the past 32 years. And then I specifically want to speak about language access and language equity. So I'm living in Suwannee, Gwinnett County. 37% of population speaking different language than English. So I'm a one-up advocate to push the language access and equity, and Gwinnett County government providing several languages on their website, including Spanish and Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, and other language there. So the people living in there, Gwinnettians, can access, and then there's your option. We can translate their website to different language, like Koreans. I'm a Korean, and then we can access the public service. They can understand what this public service entity trying to do. But when we're talking about freedom to vote, to participating civil duties, let's talk about the My Voter page. It only provide English. So we have problem to understand, especially the older generation, like their 70s, 80s. They still want to vote, but they cannot understand any language on the My Voter page. That's the biggest website affecting our freedom to vote. So I need to help my campaign. I'm a candidate for State House 99. So my campaign is especially have an intention to have this session, like helping people, like voters, to access the absentee ballot page and help them to get on and the request the absentee ballot, to help them to exercise their voting rights. So let's push the language equity, and then people can participate more democratic process. So that's what we want to do as a whole, as collectively, because diverse, is already here, and we need to push that inclusion and equity, and then one of them is just language, because we're saying literally language barriers. Language barriers is there. And then when you go to schools in Gwinnett County, if you see there's so many different ethnicity over there in one class, even elementary, middle school, and high school. So let's push it, language equity, because we expecting more diverse community going forward in Georgia. So I want to focus on the language equity, and then because my perspective, I'm a one-up immigrant, and then I want to speak on behalf of those population. Thank you.
Question. Quick question. Thank you, Chairwoman. And thank you for sharing that and the language barrier. I'd like to hear your thoughts about, for me, it's a conflict. On the one hand, we are constantly hearing about Georgia is the #1 state to do business. I'm very excited that we have great jobs and businesses coming to our communities. And those businesses often are looking for very particular skill sets with their employees. And multilingual is often, one of those really great attributes for students to have when they graduate either high school or college. And so to me, it's just this strange dichotomy, right? On the one hand, we want more skills like inclusivity and collaboration and mental flexibility and the ability to learn multiple languages. And then on the other hand, we have over here, no more DEI. We want to push back on these areas. So I'm curious to know, in your professional world and as the things you've just described, how does that make sense to you? And again, your experience and understanding communities that do have that ability, those great skills in being able to understand multiple languages and multiple communities.
So I mean, especially in Gwinnett County, it's very diverse community. So living in there, so I think it's serving the community and they're serving the population. The DE is just equity and then inclusion must be there because it's requested by the people they're living in there. So let me talking about because I'm very concerned about this election year. Everybody has to have access to the voting. Voting, just using their civil rights, right? Participating in voting. So let's talking about the small business owners. So there's many small business owners out there, and then they have no time to get out the vote because they have to stay in the business, open to close. And then somebody living in small business, somebody working at small business, they have no luxury going get out the vote. So, small business, they have to run like 7 days a week. So they cannot be excused to go out, vote. So that's why we're talking about, the voter suppressions and here. And then we recently, last week, we just state election board making some very weird decision that U.S. citizens only. That really intimidating the community. So, DEI, I know there's understanding, there's a people opposition opposing the DEI, but obviously we have the government is just public service entity. They have to listen and they have to listen to the voice and the requests and the needs from the community. So I think we have to push DEI because that's how we serve the people living in the area. Thank you.
We are coming to our final speaker for the evening, Kabir Amari.
It's a lot of pressure being last. All right, hi everyone. My name is Kabir Amari. That's one first name. I use they, them pronouns. I'm gonna talk very quickly about lobsters. I love lobsters. Most people don't realize that they're pretty much immortal, meaning that unless you're in Maine and you boil them and have some butter, they will live forever. The only time lobsters die is when they stop molting, when they lose the energy to molt, to evolve, to grow. And I'm tying this back to DEI in that after the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Tony McDade, a lot of organizations did make public statements saying they wanted to become more diverse, inclusive, equitable. They wanted to foster belonging in their organizations. Unfortunately, that work has stopped. Now we're seeing the pushback. And so what does that have to do with lobsters? Growth is messy. It is uncomfortable. It is sometimes dangerous, right? Lobsters are very vulnerable when they molt. They have to find a safe place to do it, right? But growth is important. If you have a personal trainer, you're not gonna stay with that personal trainer if they only make you lift 5 pounds. All right, you have to hurt a little bit. You have to work at it. And unfortunately, when we got to the messy area, people backed up from DEI. So what I need from politicians is for us to acknowledge that there is a necessity in the messiness and that everything is going to be okay on the other side, right? And that's how you support this work. That's how you support DEI. I own a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging firm. And I would love to say we're growing and it's wonderful, and we are growing and it is wonderful. I just opened up my second office, but I opened it in Portland, Oregon. I live in Decatur. I don't have a lot of clients in the Georgia area because of anti-CRT laws, because organizations in Georgia are moving away from DEI, but people in the West Coast hire me. But unfortunately, when I moved to the West Coast, I'm moving away from the diversity of Atlanta. Atlanta is an extremely diverse place, full of people of color and immigrants and non-English speaking people, full of LGBTQ people. And the further I move away from Atlanta, the less diversity I get, but that's where I'm getting hired to do DEI work. Make that make sense, as Monique sometimes says, right? And so I also wanted to share that as a former educator, I once came across a study. And in this study, they said that they were proving that students of color, students who were LGBTQ, and students who had disabilities were the most likely to be discriminated against in schools, especially if they had two or more of those identities all at the same time. And what this study concluded was that society has to become more diverse, more inclusive, more affirming, and less discriminatory. That is the only way to stop the anxiety, depression, suicidality, and addiction that they're seeing in those groups of young people. Because they found that anxiety, depression, and addiction is coming from the discrimination that they're experiencing and them trying to cope with that discrimination. And this was a very controversial study because this was a scientific study that had a social justice conclusion, right? But we see this over and over. We now can prove that DEI is good. And we see DEI sometimes as being helpful to others. And in a combative society, we sometimes pretend that civil rights are like pie, like if I get some, then you get less. That's not how it works. The studies are now showing that even white people benefit from diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are many studies that have proven this, that it's how we can become mutually synergistic. How can we work together? How can we live more equitably? How can we get along better? And so that's something that I also want to center in DEI, that this is work for everyone. In the same way that patriarchy privileges men, patriarchy also hurts many men. In the same way that white supremacy privileges white people, white supremacy also harms a lot of white people. And so we have to start talking about DEI in that way as well. And the last thing I wanted to say was I wanted to remind us, since we're at this National Civil Rights Center, Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1960s defied the NAACP by openly supporting Bayard Rustin, an openly gay man, which was an uncomfortable and difficult conversation for all who were involved. Right? But the way that we move through this work is to be uncomfortable, to sit with that discomfort and understand that it is mutually beneficial for all those involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've come to the end of our speakers. I want to make sure that we have not missed anybody who have something that they'd like to share with us. If not, what about members of the panel? Is anything burning on your hearts and minds that you'd like to share with us before we leave?
Hey, I just wanted to say thank you for all our panelists. Oh, well, not panelists, but speakers today. You all were very informative. I learned a few things, and we will work together to put together the information that you gave us. I would like to get your data and reach out to you for some data on some of the issues that I'm working on. But this is how we start the process. This is how we get the ball rolling here in Georgia. And us being up here is a step. So like us having this committee is a step, is a huge step. And it comes from your thoughts and ideas and your concerns and you guys reaching out to help us formulate this committee. So I appreciate everyone who came up here to speak and give us all this very informative information.
Again, a tremendous thank you to every single person who came tonight to speak, maybe share your stories on the video. Please continue to share that QR code. We would love to hear from as many people as possible across the state. And thank you again for sharing your personal experiences, your professional experiences. Would love to get more data. Excited to be a part of this. And, there is, I think somebody used the words irrefutable data. There's much irrefutable data to show that the case for diversity, the case for equity, the case for inclusion not only holds, but every year it gets stronger for all of the reasons that you've all shared. So I will just echo, we're committed to keeping this conversation going, to putting forth policy that enables DEI to continue, that removes barriers. Many legislative ideas I think will result from this, so thank you.
So, over the last 6 weeks, I've traveled from cities like New York, San Francisco, to Sydney, to Auckland, New Zealand, Tokyo, Japan, and I can tell you the rest of the world is focused on DEI. That is how they're going to grow their economy, and that's where they see the future of their countries are going. And so we can't go backwards here in the US, so I'm very glad we have this panel. I'm going to close with this one bit about our House caucus. A few months ago, we held the first tri-caucus town hall, comprising of the AAPI caucus, the Black caucus, and the Hispanic caucus. And we discussed how we were going to move forward as a tri-caucus to affect change in Georgia. We're going to have our second town hall this Friday in Peachtree Corners, led by Senator Nikki Merritt, Senator Jason Estevez, and State Rep Michelle Au at 6 p.m. in Peachtree Corners at Peachy Corners Cafe. So if you're looking for something to do Friday night, come check out the town hall.
I'll just quickly close by thanking each and every one of you for being here and being a part of this conversation. Madam Chair, thank you for convening us. The work it's too important, and it's crystal clear. We're talking about people, we're talking about opportunity, we're talking about the success of our communities and our country, and it all rests on empowerment, representation, support, inclusion. And so I just, two themes for me stick out. One, this idea of we have to build a bench of more champions for this work. It can't just be us at the table if we're expecting to really move the needle and affect lives. And so our ability, it was mentioned, the last speaker said, it is very uncomfortable for some, right? I would imagine folks who are not in this room, it may be very uncomfortable and messy, and it's our job to hold people through that process because we need more champions and supporters of this work. And I love what you also said about DE&I work. I mean, it positively impacts all, right? What benefits one benefits everyone. And so our ability, again, the hearts and minds work that we have to do to let people know this isn't just for me because of the color of my skin or you because of how you look or your gender or orientation. It's for each and every one of us in the future that we need to create for our kids, our families, and our community. So thank you again. It starts with conversations like this and you all showing up. So thank you for being here.
So as we come to the end of our meeting tonight, I want to thank this amazing panel. Y'all give them a round of applause. And I want to say that they didn't know exactly what I was asking them to do, but they said yes. And so we're so happy that they're here, and we're so happy that you came tonight to share with us. If you chose not to speak today, or if you were not able to do so, and would like to submit a video or an audio or written testimony, please scan the QR code and bookmark it. This is the first of 3 hearings that we're going to have. We're going to Albany, Georgia, and we're also going to Savannah, Georgia, because this topic, DEI, is not just about Atlanta. It's about the entirety of our state. And so we want to hear from everyone. And again, I want to thank everyone who came to speak to us tonight. We want you to know that we hear you, and we want you to know that we are learning from you, because our communities are not served by attacks on diversity. We all know that. We know that our communities are not served by whitewashing our history or silencing people of color or trying to eliminate the right to choose or criminalizing poverty and mental illness. Our communities are not served by ignoring gun violence and ignoring the climate crisis or ignoring the property insurance crisis or ignoring the affordability issues that we face. Georgia House Democrats are here because we believe that all Georgians deserve the freedom to be healthy, to be prosperous, to be safe. And we have been inspired tonight by the stories that we've heard, and we're going to continue to work on your behalf. So thank you for being here today. Your presence here makes us go back and reevaluate the jobs that we have to do. And as we go back to the Georgia General Assembly in January, we will be standing firm and working for you. So thanks again, and thank you so much for being here. We want to thank our hosts tonight, the Center for Human and Civil Rights. This has been a great venue for us, and we want to thank them.
Chair Lady Hughley, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
This is a state of emergency as we're speaking here about DEI. I forgot to mention this. I'm known as Miss Free School Lunch because I've been fighting for free school lunch for our children for the past 2 years. And tomorrow is the deadline for Governor Kemp to accept funds for our children to get free summer meals in 2025. He denied them in 2024. So our parents had to jump through loopholes to receive free school lunch. The deadline for him to accept this money from the feds, which will not come out the state budget. So this money is given to us from the federal government. It's there, it's for us, and if it's not being used, it's just not gonna be used. It's just gonna burn away or go to other states. So Governor Kemp has until tomorrow to accept this. We have huge organizations reaching out to him, flooding his office, but this allotment would give parents, let's see, I can give you the exact facts, but up to like almost $400 or $500 over the summer for parents with multiple kids, and I think it's $120 for a single, for one child, but that's every month. So you'll get, I think, the minimum $40 a month for food. $20 helps any family, I can tell you that right now. I'm a single parent, and if I got $40 a month extra, I would definitely go stock my deep freezer up with some meat or some vegetables or whatever the case may be. But we need to act because these summer meals are part of DEI. It's part of DEI because who is it going to affect the most? And our children went without this summer, and it was a struggle. I got tons of emails from parents saying, what's happening? How do I get it? And you had to go to the school and sit there and eat your lunch. And how is that going to help parents who don't have the transportation to take their child to the school to eat the lunch and the time to sit there and have their child eat twice a day for the summer? So we need to reach out to the governor's office. You can email his office tonight, and you can blow up his phones tomorrow, but tomorrow is the deadline, and we will miss out on millions of dollars to feed children. That doesn't come out of our budget.
Thank you all so much. We want to thank Representative Barnes. She has been a leader on this topic. We have to feed our children in order for them to learn and in order for them to be prepared to move forward. And so we're all about the future, and we're all about moving forward. And I want to personally thank her for being a champion on this particular topic. And every parent understands how important this is. And so, with all of that said, it's time for us to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley.